Roundtable. My name is Annette Brown. I'm the Principal Economist at FHI 360. Research Roundtable is where I have the opportunity to sit down with one of my colleagues at FHI 360 and talk about their recently published research. Today, I'm pleased to be talking with my colleague, Dr. Anne Smiley. Anne and other FHI 360 colleagues recently published an article titled Examining Best Practices for Literacy Coaching and Monitoring, Evidence from Northern Nigeria and Ghana. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Annette.
So for our viewers' information, before we get started, I just want to note that the article itself presents evidence for both Northern Nigeria and Ghana, but today in our episode, we're going to focus on the evidence from Northern Nigeria. So this research was conducted on a program that FHI 360 is implementing in Northern Nigeria. So maybe we should start by the motivation behind the work that we are doing there.
Yeah, absolutely, Annette. So really, this program stems from the fact that there's mounting evidence that foundational literacy skills should be taught in the mother tongue, especially in the early grades. And our program in Nigeria is a Hausa language teaching and learning program. So we were developing teaching and learning materials in Hausa, which is the lingua franca of Northern Nigeria. And then we're training teachers to use those materials in the classroom.
And so what was the intervention that you're studying here?
So teacher professional development is a growing field, and we now know that coaching is a really critical element of any teacher professional development program. So at the beginning of this program in Nigeria, we hired external experts to come in and provide coaching support directly to teachers. Now, as I mentioned, this Hausa literacy program was kind of starting from the ground up with new materials and approaches and teaching strategies. And so because of that, we employed a pretty directive coaching model. We had coaches come in and provide support to teachers to really help them be able to implement the model the way that it was designed from the ground up. Now, there was a lot of value being shown by this coaching model, and our Nigerian colleagues about midway through realized that the method or the model of bringing in external coaches really wasn't going to be sustainable in the long term. And so we decided to continue to implement the model, but actually bring in system actors or school inspectors to provide that coaching alongside the external actors at the same time.
And so when you explain it that way, it seems to make sense to use the actors already working in the school system to provide these services. So why didn't you start there from the beginning?
Yeah, in retrospect, it seems clear that we should have. However, there was evidence coming from mostly high-income contexts, actually, that you shouldn't combine a supervisory role and a coaching role into one position, because that supervisory role can actually undermine the supportive relationship between a coach and a teacher. So we didn't design it that way from the beginning.
Yeah, so that makes sense too, because it seems like it could be a conflict of interest.
Exactly.
So really interesting, because now you have these competing modes of providing this coaching, both of which make sense in some ways. And you as a good evaluator said, hey, let's use this opportunity for learning.
Yeah, we ended up with this kind of embedded opportunity for an experiment within the program with these external coaches as well as sort of school inspectors providing the same role at the same time. And we were lucky because we were also collecting learning outcomes data from a sample of pupils in the same schools where this coaching was taking place with teachers. And so we were able to use student learning as our outcome measure for the study.
So a great comparison and a really good outcome measure. I'll let our viewers know that in the paper, you can see that they also employed pretty sophisticated empirical methodologies in order to tease out the difference between these externally hired coaches and the school inspectors, given that some of the same teachers had services from both of them. We won't go into all of those statistics here, but Anne, maybe you can tell us what the main finding of the quantitative analysis was.
Yeah, it really was that the school inspectors, these sort of system actors, actually showed a slightly higher per visit effect than the external coaches that we were bringing in, these experts. And they were doing the same job in the same schools. So that was able to show us that their delivery of lesson observations and feedback to teachers was just a little bit more effective, actually, than the external experts.
And that's, I mean, going into this with your experience from other contexts, that's not what you would have hypothesized.
It wasn't. It was very reassuring to see that we actually had this opportunity to provide quality support to teachers through system actors.
That's great. Now, one of the reasons that I feel like the paper is so useful to implementers for understanding the difference between these two and why you got the finding that you did is because you also have a lot of qualitative analysis, which was led by you. You're primarily a qualitative researcher. And that analysis really benefited from your ability to collect data from across the different types of actors that you were working with as you were implementing both of these methods. Tell us a little bit about what you found with the qualitative analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, really the most striking finding was just consistent reporting from teachers that they wanted more coaching and that they loved having that coaching provided by their school inspector. They didn't see any challenge with having that combined supervisory and coaching role, and they were just hungry for more support and for that direct feedback coming from their supervisors. And in fact, because it was their school supervisors, they may have been a little bit more inclined to actually implement the program the way it was designed, knowing that they were going to be measured against that. The school inspectors themselves were also motivated by the opportunity to provide that direct feedback to teachers. They found it rewarding to get to see teachers improving from session to session, and it was overall intrinsically motivating for both the teachers and for the school inspectors to have this kind of model built into the system. So I think the lesson learned for me is that you can really build local ownership and build this local motivation to implement the program as it was designed if you build these mechanisms into both the teaching and the coaching function.
That's really great. And your qualitative research really helps to bring those findings to light and help us to understand them. And when I was reading the article, I felt like, what's important here is both this specific context and also the role that the starting point makes, that this is bringing coaches in to help teachers do something brand new that they haven't done before. And so maybe that makes it much less threatening than a situation where maybe you're saying, we want coaches to kind of help you do something better than you've already done. And so really taking into account the context and taking into account the starting point helps to understand why you have this really important finding about the ability to use these system actors in this way.
Yeah, I think that is right. And I think that having the opportunity for these institutional actors to come in and provide that direct support to teachers in a very direct, clear way was perfectly suited to this sort of new intervention that we were putting in place with the House of Reading program, as you described.
Yeah, so many important insights from this research. Tell me, what kind of impact has the research had so far?
Well, it really has changed the way that we, from an NGO perspective, are designing and implementing, early grade reading programs and mother tongue programs. We always look for opportunities now to integrate coaching into the system and into the education system. Whenever we have the opportunity, we no longer assume that we shouldn't combine the supervisory and coaching role into one position. So that's kind of a clear change. And then, even in Nigeria, where I continue to work, we have seen several state governments continuing to sustain and scale this kind of school inspector as coach model and continue to adapt on it and improve on it and continue to sort of iterate the way that they're making that work.
Well, that's fabulous. So I want to remind our viewers that you can read more about these findings and also about the findings from Ghana in the article that Anne and her colleagues published in Social Sciences and Humanities Open. Thank you, Anne, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Annette.
To our viewers, thank you for joining us for Research Roundtable, and I hope that you will try out another one of our episodes that are available on YouTube. Thanks.